Fakultas Ilmu Kesehatan. Fakultas Psikologi. Fakultas Kedokteran Gigi.
Good morning, Professor Chaba. Are you here? Wow.
Good morning. I can hear you.
Thank you.
Let's try the share option on the
Okay.
screen.
Okay.
Whether it works or not.
Uh-huh.
This is the first slide, but
Yes.
I cannot step forward from this window. So I might share the outline window of PPT.
Okay. If you need our help, you can share your PPT. Maybe the operator from here will share the screen. Okay. Oh, okay.
This might look still quite large.
What is fine?
But the animation will disappear. So there is some loss in this mode. Never mind.
But yeah, I think it doesn't problem. So we can see the substance, the slide here.
Yeah, but you will see all points in the outline in an instance and not one by one.
No, we cannot see in detail because the slide is very small. The other slide.
Yeah, but for example, if I show the fourth slide, you will
Okay.
see everything in an instance.
Yeah.
But it's not a problem. There are 36 slides, which is appropriate for either 5 minutes or 5 hours. As we discussed, it will be in between.
Yeah. No problem. I think still it will be very insightful for us if you share all of the slide here. Rizka, Pak Sultan, mau kita mulai Pak Sultan?
Ya, Pak.
Okay, we can start.
Okay, everyone, let's begin our event today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Welcome to the international webinar organized by the Faculty of Education, Universitas Muhammadiyah Surabaya, with the topic about the significant roles of metacognition in education. Before we begin, allow me to extend our warm greetings to our distinguished speakers, Professor Dr. Sabasikos from the University of Szeged, Hungary, the Honorable Dean of the Faculty of Education, Universitas Muhammadiyah Surabaya, Bapak Ahmad Hidayatullah, PhD, and respected lecturers, beloved students, and all participants in this afternoon. It is truly an honor to have you all with us today on this special occasion via Zoom platform. To begin our program, let us together sing National Anthem of Indonesia Raya, followed by Mars Muhammadiyah.
Apa? Tadi. Iya.
Thank you. The next, I would like to invite the head of the committee to deliver his speech to Bapak Sultan Dedi Wijaya SPD MPD. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Rizka. Is my voice clear?
Yes, Mr.
Okay, thank you. It is nice to see you, Prof. Sabang. You look handsome today. Okay, dear audience, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
All praise is due to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and blessing and peace be upon the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It is both an honor and a privilege, to welcome you to the inaugural session of our international webinar series. And today, focus on the significant role of metacognition in education. And today we embark on a journey to explore a concept that holds transformative potential for both educators and learners alike, metacognition. And this webinar series is proudly presented as one of the key programs of the international partnership units within the Faculty of Teacher Training and Education. It reflects our ongoing commitments to fostering global collaboration, exchanging ideas, and broadening our understanding of impactful educational practices across borders. And today, we are particularly privileged today to have with us a distinguished speaker, Prof. Dr. Saba Sikos, from University of Szeged, Hungary, whose expertise in this field will provide invaluable insight, of course. And I would like also to extend my deepest gratitude to the Dean and the Vice Deans of Faculty for unwavering support and for facilitating these programs. And thank you for joining us, dear audience. I look forward to the vibrant discussions and ideas that will emerge from this session. And I'm excited for the opportunities that lie ahead with Prof. Sabah as we explore the power of metacognition together. Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Bapak Sultan Dedi, for the inspiring message for this event. And the next, we are pleased to invite the Dean of the Faculty of Education to deliver welcoming remarks to Bapak Ahmad Hidayatullah, PhD. Please, time is yours.
Thank you, Rizka. Good morning, Professor Chaba, in Hungary. I think this early morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Distinguished guest, Professor Chaba Chikos, our speaker today. He is the head of Institute of Education in University of Szeged in Hungary, and also he is the leader of MTA Metacognition Research Group, respected Vice Dean of Academic and Vice Dean of Human Resources, and respected all head and secretary of studies program. Yes, student, college, and all participants. It is a great pleasure for me, on behalf of Faculty of Education, to warm welcome you all in our international webinar series. This part of this webinar series is part of our continuous effort to increase our insight, to broaden our perspective, and to learn from international and global experts, and to enrich our academic community. And Professor Chaba, I think I should inform you that Faculty of Education here has 9 studies program, from mathematics education, biology education, uh, English, Indonesia, and the last is master degree in Indonesia. And maybe this is the last of our webinar, international webinar using Faculty of Education name, because we try to rebranding our faculty, and now we try to change the nomenclature of the name of our faculty. So maybe the next webinar will not use Faculty of Education anymore, and we will try to establish several new studies program. And for all participants, today we are really privileged and we are really grateful to host Professor Chaba Chikos as distinguished speaker in our international webinar. And his expertise in metacognition is really inspiring, and his research also inspire many researchers, other researchers from many countries, and also young researchers from different countries. So our discussion today will be very fruitful. And the topic about metacognition is highly relevant with the current situation, especially in Indonesian context, and also in digital era where the information spread very quickly, and sometimes we consume inaccurate information. So I think the real challenge is for teacher and student right now, how to reflect, how to regulate, and how to govern their own learning. I think we can handle all of this using metacognitive skill. And the issue or topic about metacognitive skill remind me about what Thomas Nicol, professor from USA, wrote on his book, The Deed of Expertise. The differences between lay people or incompetent people with an expert is because lay people sometimes over confident and overestimate about their abilities. So sometimes they don't realize the exact level of their understanding. For instance, student might be from mathematics or from biology. They go to the test with the overestimate about their abilities, and the reality they are failed with the test. What this happen? Why this happen? Professor Thomas Nicol said because many people less or have no metacognitive skill. With metacognitive skill, we can understand the limit of our understanding, what is going on, what have already done, and what should we do to improve our knowledge. So I think our topic in webinar today will be very fruitful for us, and will be very insightful to implement and to increase our understanding about student achievement in Indonesian context. And we are very happy, and so we are many thanks to Professor Chabachikos who are joining with us. And so today we just discuss in online. So in the future, we do hope that we can invite you physically to here. Maybe next year or 2 years, we will invite you and we can discuss personally in here with many people. Thank you so much. My this webinar will be very fruitful and insightful for us. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much for the warm and encouraging remark, Bapak Ahmad Hidayatullah PhD. And ladies and gentlemen, now is the main session of today's webinar. The keynote speaker will be delivered by Prof. Dr. Sabasikos from the University of Szeged, Hungary, and will be guided by our moderator, Bapak Sultan Dedi Wijaya MPD. To Bapak Sultan Dedi Wijaya MPD, we kindly hand over the session to you. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Rizka. Okay, hi everyone. It's joining with me again. Yeah, and it is my great pleasure, yeah, to welcome you all to today's webinar. As part of our international webinar series, yeah, we are excited here to have an engaging session with experts from Szeged, from Professor Sabasikos. And today's topic promises to be both insightful and thought-provoking, of course, with the topic the significant role of metacognition in education. Yeah, and we are honored to have with us Prof. Sabasikos. Yeah, who will be sharing his expertise on these critical subjects. Yeah, Prof. Sabasikos have distinguished career in education and cognitive psychology, and is well versed in the latest research on metacognition. And before we dive into this session, I encourage all of you, dear lecturers and all participants, to participate actively. Please feel free to ask a question in the chats, and we will have the question and answer session toward the end. Without further ado, I will now hand over the floor to our esteemed speaker, Professor Sabasikos, to enlighten us on the significant role of metacognition in education. It is a pleasure to hand the session over to you, Prof. Sabasikos.
Thank you. Salam alaikum. You said good afternoon, but this is morning in Hungary, so we are far from each other. Your Honorable Dean, Ahmad Hidayatullah, invited me, and I said immediately yes. Maybe you don't know why. He was my best ever PhD student at the University of Szeged. You might have experienced that he is diligent, effective, and whatever positive things we can say about a researcher. So we worked together for some years, and we hope to continue our collaboration in the future. The topic of metacognition can be discussed in 5 minutes and in 5 hours. So let me ask, what is the optimal length of my presentation? I have 36 slides, as I can share the screen with you. And maybe now it's possible to step forward on my slides one by one. Can you see the second slide now? It's about the agenda of the speech. So I'm not quite sure whether the projection mode works fine. I ask for some feedback, whether you see my second slide now on the agenda. Is it appropriate now?
Still, first slide, Mr.
Okay, then I will escape from the projection mode and we will use the outline version. Thank you for the feedback. So the agenda of today's presentation is here. It's very simple. What is metacognition? Why is it important in education? And on the last slides, I will recommend the most important articles or chapters. Since we don't know what is the research field of the participants, I tried to select phenomena and publications that might be of very common interest for everyone. My main field is mathematics education and the connection of metacognition and mathematics education. However, metacognition research is very widespreadly used in other fields of education, like reading or science education. So what is metacognition? We know several concepts, starting with the 4 letters meta. Meta is of Greek origin, and it refers to something that is more comprehensive or transcending. In some sense, it means more abstract or of a higher level. The second part of the term, I used the smiley sign here. What is cognition? It's not so simple to define cognition. Usually we describe it in other terms like knowledge and other processes that relates to the human cognitive capacity. Cognitive means a sphere of human personality. It is distinguished from the affective sphere and the psychomotor field of personality. So we are talking about the cognitive and metacognitive spheres of personality. Historically, the term appeared only in the 20th century. However, several thousand years ago, philosophers identified the term and the phenomena. Of course, they used different words. There was a famous ancient Greek paradox. Can we understand such a sentence like, "What I am saying is not true"? Can such a sentence be true or false? There is a kind of controversy or paradox in this sentence. We need to look at the meaning of the sentence from a higher perspective. This higher level from which things can be visible more clearly is a long-lasting idea in the history of philosophy. There was a kind of metaphor from a psychologist, the German psychologist Wundt, and if you see the picture, this is about a famous European story about a liar who pulled out himself from the lake by pulling his hair. It's a kind of impossible thing, of course, physically, but sometimes we do similar things when we try to understand our own thinking. Can we understand, can we study our own thinking? Is it possible to use only a small part of our thinking for observing and describing the other, or the whole together? It seems to be impossible. It's a long philosophical debate how we can handle these paradoxes. You see a misspelled sentence at the bottom of the slide. Can we read it? Yes. This sentence contains 3 errors. You immediately observe 2 errors, 2 spelling errors. This and 3 are misspelled here. But it seems to be only 2 errors. What is the third? The third is about the whole meaning of the sentence. So 2 errors come from the spelling level, and another comes from a higher level. So this upper level of human thinking was identified in philosophy and in linguistics as well. So now we come to the 20th century approaches, and philosophy worked a lot on clarifying whether metacognition has anything to do with consciousness. In English, there are 2 words about consciousness. I don't know the Indonesian linguistic equivalents. In several languages, there is only 1 term to depict such processes like consciousness and awareness. Traditionally, consciousness is a larger phenomena, and awareness is a kind of subset of consciousness. Awareness means the potential to talk about the thinking processes. So we can be conscious about things without the ability to speak about them. For example, when driving, of course, we should be in a conscious state of mind, but we are not really verbalize what we are actually doing. In education and in classroom settings, we usually focus on the verbalized processes of consciousness and metacognition. The classical metacognitive theories referred to conscious processes, and especially to the processes that the English call awareness. Awareness means potentially reportable. We can potentially speak about our thinking processes, and even more importantly in education, about others' thinking processes. That might be the key to help them develop. We should understand and we should describe different pathways of knowledge in order to make appropriate intervention. The psychological understanding of metacognition started in the 20th century, especially the first article I will show you on the last slides was from Flavel. It was in 1971 when meta-memory as a term appeared. Meta-memory means I have understanding of my memory processes. And by this knowledge, my memory can be used more efficiently. The child has a fledgling growing knowledge about his or her memory, how to use, how to learn things. The adults can be more effectively use the memory resources because of the knowledge about memory. A higher level of thinking helps to use the lower level processes more appropriately. As you experience when doing research, and especially when publishing research, we need to join the international scientific community. Science is global, and there are some leading figures, key players in each field. John Flavel from the United States of America is one of the key player. Another is from Germany called Kluwe. And as you see, the 70s and the 80s then was a kind of flourishing era in metacognition research. You can read the two opposing terms, declarative and procedural. These terms were used in simple cognitive processes. So it was already well known that some things seems to be static in our mind, like knowing what is the capital of Indonesia. I know it might be changed, but currently maybe it's Jakarta. This is a kind of static knowledge in my mind. A procedural knowledge is how can I find the name of the capital of any country? This is a procedural knowledge. And similar distinction can be made on a higher level, on the meta level. I may have knowledge about the processes of the human thinking, of human mind, and additionally, I can manage those processes without saying a word. In the year of 2000, a new and seemingly very simple distinction appeared. This is very famous from Stanovich and West. And you probably know the Nobel Prize winner scientist Daniel Kahneman. He won the Nobel Prize in economics, and he definitely used this Stanovich and West distinction, which is more or less about cognition and metacognition. So if you see in the literature these system 1 and system 2 terms, however they seem so simple, they resemble the non-metacognitive and the metacognitive levels of thinking. Kahneman wrote a book, it's quite famous, about thinking fast and slow. We need fast processes in our thinking, of course, in order to be effective. But those fast processes produce many mistakes and errors because of the speed. And we need to use slow processes as well that control and regulate the otherwise fast but full of error, fast thinking processes. There was an article written by Thomas Nelson. It was in 1996, and until today, this is still used and cited. If you check it, there are several thousands of citations to that article, which tried to conceptualize and visualize the metacognitive and the non-metacognitive processes. In Nelson's model, I can now show you the visual version. So there are two levels. The lower one is called object level, and the higher level is called meta level. And there is a continuous flow of information between the two. In our thinking, there might be two levels with continuous flow of information between them. We need a higher level of thinking that can control the lower level fast processes. Also in the school and out of the school as well. The object level, the fast processes of our thinking, must inform the meta level. So there is a continuous flow of information, and you see the term model, which may reflect the declarative knowledge of metacognition. We need some good plans, good schemes in order to work effectively. Like the musicians use written notes for their play, it seems to be a kind of plan what they will do. Going back to the previous slide, let's examine again the sentence with 3 errors. And as I mentioned, this sentence contains 3 errors, contain 2 lower level errors and 1 meta level error. One strength of the Nelson article was the search for neuroanatomical correlates. We make a distinction between mind and brain. Of course, you know the brain is a biological construct. The mind is a psychological construct. But surely there is a kind of connection between the two. And in natural sciences, there is an assumption usually held by researchers that psychological processes like metacognition should have a kind of biological basis within our skull, in our brain. Where is the place of metacognition? Where are the planning processes? Where are the monitoring or evaluation processes? And there are some networks within our brain that are more active and more responsible for planning processes, especially. Sometimes when in an accident, some injury destroys some brain regions, the role of some brain regions have been revealed. It happened in the last several decades that due to brain injuries, the weak level of psychological processes have been revealed. Consequently, for example, the planning processes will almost completely disappear if there is a kind of injury in the frontal lobe of the brain. So we might simplify, if anyone asks you after this seminar, there are open questions, but the planning processes of metacognition are strongly connected to the frontal part of our brain. if there is one meta level, is it possible that there is a further level built on the meta level, which might be called meta-meta level? And you can imagine an infinite number of sequences on each meta or meta-meta level. Another further level might be built on. Is it possible, or is it just a logical or fictitious possibility? And there was an Italian movie in the 80s, the title of which is written here. I know that you know that I know. I think it requires much effort to understand such a sentence. However, linguistically, it's quite simple. I can say such sentences quite easily without understanding them. So the implication is, whatever the complexity of the material is, there is always a chance that we can simplify the things into two levels. And actually, the object level and the meta level can change into another object level or meta level. Something that is on the meta level for one person might belong to the object level of another person. That might be possible, but we don't really have the proofs to understand such sentences. The famous writer James Joyce had a funny sentence from the great novel Ulysses. If you try to read it, it's not so simple to read. And it's even further much more difficult to understand the James Joyce sentence. Of course, it's meaningful. It can be symbolized in mathematical terms as a philosopher did it, but such sentences requires analysis. And during analysis, I am free to define and use an object level that is convenient for me. So object levels and the meta levels seems to be relative terms, not absolute terms. I will show you an example later, but I can reveal even now to give you a food for thoughts. The simple addition, 4 plus 3. I haven't asked you to calculate the result, but I'm sure that you know the result. Without conscious planning, monitoring, and evaluation processes, you are sure that you know that it's 7 without asking you. I just mentioned 4 plus 3, but imagine a kindergarten child. Ahmad Hidayatullah's larger child might work a bit, or he might have worked a bit on this simple task. Finger counting might have been used with some planning processes about the meaningfulness of the task first. If the kindergarten child didn't find the task meaningful, then he continued playing. So there is a next possible stage to which the development can lead us. So 4 plus 3 might be calculated with several conscious processes if you don't possess the final result immediately. But for us, this information, 4 plus 3, is on the object level. We don't need metacognitive processes to calculate them. But the kindergarten children do need to use, if at all they consider it a relevant problem. in the last year of the kindergarten, usually they can solve such simple additions by finger counting. This requires long time, so it's slow thinking with many conscious steps. And the mental efforts, the food of thoughts and the biochemical molecules of the brain are intensively used. Metacognition requires much effort from us. It requires attention, conscious planning, monitoring, and evaluation. You cannot be metacognitive throughout your day, of course. I may say, too much love will kill you, too much metacognition will kill you as well. In music education research 30 years ago, it was revealed that even the best instrumental players can deliberately practice only for 3 or 4 hours per day. This might be the upper limit of our conscious efforts per day. Of course, we can wisely distribute these 3 to 4 hours throughout the day, but much and most of the things are done almost automatically in our life. But for the children, many things temporarily needs metacognitive efforts. And our task is to understand the need for metacognitive efforts and to help them overcome these steps. This requires pedagogical content knowledge. Whatever your subject is, if you are a mathematics educator, a science educator, an Indonesian language educator, and so on, you must be aware of the difficulties a student may face, and those difficulties can be tackled, can be overcome by scaffolding. Scaffolding is an English word. You might have appropriate translation. In Hungary, we don't have. So we sometimes use the English scaffolding or a metaphor, like helping those who are, for example, disabled, helping to move them from one level to another one. This figure illustrates what Stanovich and West called System 1 and System 2. I will not show you for a long time. This is more or less a working hypothesis still. We can use other terms, other processes to describe. However, it illustrates the reasoning or System 2 processes, and many of them are metacognitive processes for the majority of the mature people as well. Let's have a look out of the school. Sometimes our work in the school can be understood by means of analogies borrowed from the outer or real world. Sometimes this term is used in Hungary, the real life. Real life is something different from the school. So from some real life example, which are still strongly connected to school, let's think about the development of metacognitive processes. There are still some nice theories about the development of metacognition, saying that metacognition develops in tandem or parallel with the non-metacognitive processes. My understanding is different from this. Metacognition should be faded, should be suppressed in many fields of life in order to be more effective. And a new meta level will be opened in this way. So the development means that something that was on the meta level may be built in the object level, providing space for a new meta level. This might be appropriate and this might be feasible. And my current research is to provide more empirical evidence on this not so nice developmental trajectory. How simple it would be to depict the development of metacognition, like, for example, the development of arithmetic skills or whatever. Think of your daily life. I think many of you drives a car. And I hope that while driving, you are not conscious about each and every steps or movements you make. It would be very dangerous. If you remember what a student or learner driver does, this is metacognition. For the novice drivers, very large dose of metacognition is needed. Planning the movements on the wheel, on the gear, on the blinking, and so on. And how can we help them? There are some rules or some verbalized ideas how the instructor tries to help the learner driver. Playing an instrument doesn't need metacognition. At least it would be impossible to consciously know every little movements of our finger on the guitar or on the piano. Metacognition must go to the background and must be used for larger larger purposes or for higher level processes, like being attentive to the audience. Let me tell you that it's very good to see at least some faces here, because I try to reveal from a little nodding, from a smile, whether what I'm saying is received. So because I more or less know what I would like to talk, but I have my meta level processes reserved to be interactive, at least at the level of being slower or a bit faster when seeing the feedback from the audience. This is a kind of teacher's work, to be adaptive. Adaptation needs metacognition, of course. Language learning requires suppression of metacognition. If you cite the grammatical rules in your mind while trying to speak, you will be considered a novice speaker. Much of the rules must be automatized. This is a key word. Automatization requires metacognition to a certain extent. Then metacognition must fade, must be suppressed. In the school, there are two fields intensively studied: reading and mathematics. These two are investigated in the metacognition literature quite widely and globally. So I will bring you some examples from the school, how metacognition appears, how it works. The usual problem identified in many school systems is the skills of reading and mathematics, and of course writing and computer literacy and others, are over automatized, which is to a certain extent needed. Of course, we have to be faster and faster in our reading during the first 2 years of schooling. But in adulthood, we don't want to be even more faster in our reading. So the resources of the mind from the meta level can be freed for example, understanding what we are reading or revealing the tricks in the mathematics word problems. As I mentioned, the kindergarten age, as early as in kindergarten years, a rich repertoire of metacognitive strategies develop, like finger counting. This is metacognitive for them, and this is not metacognitive for us to calculate 4 plus 3. There is a funny quotation from a Hungarian author: a smart person is more intelligently wrong than someone else is right. Just think of some examples in your life when it's obvious. When I was a PhD student, or maybe, I already had the PhD, but I still was a novice researcher at that time, I met this book chapter from Campione, Brown, and Connell. And I was very sad because I've been thinking a lot on similar things. It was in 2000 or 2001. And suddenly I realized that 3 American researchers already published my ideas. So I was a bit sad, but I learned that reading the special literature is much needed in order to be more efficient in research. In this book chapter, 3 elementary fields of school training are compared. Reading, mathematics, and writing are seemingly different from each other. Of course they are. But from the viewpoint of metacognition, they are very similar. Usually the Americans say that these are the 3 R's: reading, arithmetic, and writing. They sound like all starting with R. So the 3 R's are compared with their problems and with their proposed solutions. From the 80s of the last century, the need for metacognition-based training in the school appeared. The school system is very slow in their changes. Teachers who once learned how to teach are hardly expected to change their strategy. How to teach, for example, the multiplication table. Is there any scientific evidence how to do this the best? There might be some, but most teachers follow the route of the memory, how the teacher himself or herself was taught 20 years ago or 30 years ago. That's why the school system is very slow. So if something revolutionary idea appears, like metacognition-based training, it needs teacher training education as well to use. Both pre-service and in-service teacher training are needed to achieve or accomplish a significant change in the school practice. Meanwhile, I was talking, you could read the common problems. Even when there are 3 different things listed in 3 columns, you clearly see the deep structural sameness of the 3 problems. Reading is often evaluated on the basis of speed and correctness. Both are important and can be trained, but reading comprehension is much more than simply decoding. In mathematics, as you see in the middle, some algorithms are taught. The most peculiar field is the word problems. How word problem solving is taught is quite strange now, because we still use the 20th century technique. Search for the figures, select an operation, execute the operation, and then give a verbal answer. This is the usual strategy in many schools. However, word problem solving should be more about problem solving and not about arithmetic techniques. Similarly, writing is focusing on the nice and well legible letters and not on the use and purposefulness of writing. Let's look into a nice example. It was really used in France. In 1980, French researchers used this task. 15 goats and 20 sheep are carried on a ship. How old is the captain? The origin of this funny word problem comes from the 18th century, if I remember. It was written down by a French novelist, Flaubert. But sometimes people find it as a joke and ask their children, their students, just to laugh at it. However, in the French experiment, the majority of the first and second grade students did solve the task. How did they solve? Of course, they used the technique without understanding of the word problem. They were confident in finding 2 figures, 15 and 20. They were get accustomed to finding an arithmetic operation. Which arithmetic operation should be used? If you have any doubt, it's addition that should work. Addition is students' favorite operation if they have no idea what to do, because addition is so nice, so simple. Multiplication is the second, and division is only the 4th in the row. It's quite unpleasant for them. In this case, addition gives you a rational or feasible number. 35 might be the age of the captain. In the second example from the same experiment, 125 sheep are guarded by 5 dogs. How old is the shepherd? And you see the transcription of the interview with a 4th grade student. 125 plus 5 is 130. too big. So addition, the most favorite operation, doesn't work. Let's see the subtraction. 120 is still too big. However, finally, there is an assumption that division should lead to an appropriate number. Let's observe that this child in the 4th grade has excellent arithmetic skills. Dividing 125 by 5 mentally, not in a written algorithm, is quite an achievement, I may say. So arithmetic skills are highly developed. That's, of course, required in the elementary years. But they are over-automatized, and there is no connection between the automatic use of arithmetic skills and with the real, meaningful application of mathematical knowledge in problem-solving settings. From 2000, the PISA studies tried to address this, this connection between skills and application. The term PISA used, mathematical literacy and reading literacy and scientific literacy, all depict the importance of bridging the gap between automatic skills and between real life problem solving. What was the implication from this pioneering study? A great French mathematics educator, Brousseau, coined the term didactic contract. The didactic contract is about the explicit and implicit rules used in the mathematics classroom. How to solve word problems. For example, sometimes it's explicitly written on the wall of the classroom. I saw several solutions, 4 steps, 5 steps, sometimes 7 steps, how to solve each and every word problem. And even when it's not explicitly written on the wall, the teacher's expectations, the teacher's evaluation strategies will give feedback to students what is the right way to solve a problem. And the problem is, for us, that these requirements seem to be taken automatically and rigidly, not flexibly. It's students' beliefs. Belief is a kind of statement that is overwhelmingly cognitive in nature, but it has some emotional and motivational components as well. So when we try to reveal students' beliefs, we usually use questionnaires because these beliefs can be verbalized. However, we should know that beliefs always contain affective components. Besides the elementary school word problems, other researchers investigated the higher level education. In this example, a university student's process was video recorded. It was in the 80s again. As you see on the horizontal axis, it was a 20-minute long observation. And the task was from geometry and from mathematical analysis. It was not a difficult task, but actually this student couldn't solve it. In the first 1 or 2 minutes, the student read the problem, and then explore means that the student wanted to find an immediate answer by means of activating every possible formulae or idea they had in mind. The same task was administered to a mathematician who worked on a different field of mathematics other than geometry and mathematical analysis. And this mathematician succeeded. But the process was very different. After reading the problem, analysis, putting the problem or cutting the problem into small pieces of problems. Then, from the video recording, it was revealed that planning processes took place and some kind of evaluation or verification processes took place as well. And you see a kind of jumping up and down in this video recording map, indicating that metacognitive and non-metacognitive processes play their role in appropriate sequence during problem solving. The most important is that metacognitive processes are usually needed, with the exception of automatically resolvable simple multiplications or additions. We need to activate our metacognitive processes, but they must sometimes go to the background, giving space to the automatic processes, like written algorithms in arithmetics. So I proposed a new theoretical model to describe how the arithmetic competence of people develop. I used the Nelsonian classical dichotomy of object level and meta level. And on the horizontal axis, there are no age groups depicted. Of course, we may guess that the first part on the timeline may refer to kindergarten children and to elementary school children. The middle range may illustrate elementary and lower secondary students' processes. And there is a further possibility to further develop when word problem solving becomes automatic. I think a mathematics educator is on this level. Then the adaptive strategy use can be activated on the meta level, because we don't need the meta level anymore for word problem solving strategies, because they may become automatic if we work on the field of mathematics education for a long time. I show you two articles. I will show further articles at the end of the presentation. Mathematical beliefs can be measured, and the obtained Descartes and Verschaffel questionnaire has an Indonesian version adapted by Ahmad Hidayatullah. So if you are interested in using, then he can help you. And this has also Hungarian and other versions. Still, this is maybe the best questionnaire to reveal students' math-related beliefs. How to change students' mathematics-related beliefs? Of course, we try to simplify the question, or we may want to try to simplify. Let's teach them mathematics beliefs. For tomorrow, you can learn the 3 most important mathematical beliefs by heart. Of course, you hear that I am now ironic. This will not work. Beliefs are so deeply set in our mind, and they develop through longer period, and because they are not only cognitive but to a certain extent affective constructs, our attitudes, our emotions should change as well while changing the beliefs. There was a famous Italian experiment. You can easily find this publication. The pronunciation it is not Mason, but Mazone. It's an Italian name, Lucia Mazone, and Scrivani is the co-author. She was a in-service teacher, and she herself implemented this intervention program. And you see the principles of the program. For the students' part, they were simply encouraged to do mathematics, not only grab the only right solution. That is a usual mistake in mathematics education, to provide simple tasks with only one appropriate solution, and the winner is who is the quickest. And all the others remain in deep shame. We were so slow to find the appropriate solution. On the contrary, we can find tasks that may have multiple solutions, or even better, we can define tasks when it's not the solution that is interesting, but the thinking process that helps to reach the good solution. And the way is, they used drawings. The role of drawing in mathematics education has long been recognized, and there are some well-documented research. Use drawings even when you, as the teacher, don't feel the need to have drawings. Students, of course, will not feel the need of drawings as well in mathematics. They feel the need of symbols and figures. But believe me, and there is scientific documentation, drawings, and not uniform drawings, but individually adaptive drawings, will help in understanding the mathematical situations. The most famous experiment in the field of mathematics and metacognition is from 1999. It was done in Belgium. We call it the Flemish experiment. In general, if you want to implement an intervention program, you shouldn't change only one thing. This is not physics. This is not chemistry, when only one thing should be changed and the other should be kept constant. This is general in the natural sciences, but it's either impossible or not valid in educational experiments. If you change the tasks, like you see in the second row, you should change the method. You should change the classroom atmosphere. And importantly, you should set metacognitive processes as an aim. I will speed up a bit because I see that time is passing. So since I'm not so confident in reading education, my papers are usually co-authored by my friend János Steklach. So reading education gives another analogical example. Could you read the first sentence of this slide anyway? Of course. In what ways are mature readers better? This is the first sentence. It has very, very many spelling errors, but we are mature readers, so we can read such sentences. A novice reader cannot. This means that we have completely different reading processes in the mind. How those processes transform during the years requires scientific study of reading processes, including eye movement studies. And currently, reading education focuses on reading comprehension that involves both object level and meta level processes of reading. If you want to study reading education and metacognition together, here are some keywords you can use and you will find good ideas in the literature. So now I will be quicker in this part. And on the next slide, I just want to illustrate that there are empirical investigations revealing the role of metacognition in the reading comprehension. The first is with the German and Australian 3rd and 4th grade students. And you can identify that metacognition, as measured by a questionnaire in this case, has significant contribution to reading comprehension. Motivation in this age group had a more or less indirect contribution. However, many elementary teachers and reading educators think that it's motivation that is the most important. Children must like reading. Of course, it's not disadvantageous if they like reading, because it gives the chance of being exposed to reading materials. But cleverly teaching them, motivation is only one factor that brings its effect through decoding. In other words, decoding is on the object level, and the metacognition is on the meta level of reading processes. This further empirical investigation shows the role of reading strategies in high school, in grade 9. And if you see the other components of reading comprehension, reading strategies has not so big role in this age group. And it appears through inference, in other terms, through reasoning, through inferential reasoning. I show you the name of some reading awareness questionnaires. They are very different from each other, and I will skip the next slides. If you are interested in reading awareness and reading strategies and how to measure them, you will find easily these 3 classical questionnaires. Today, what is used the most is the revised version of the Marcy, the last one. The IRA is a bit out of fashion now, and the MSI is quite different from the other two. It's more like a cognitive quiz or test. Just a short look at the questionnaires, how they look like. Jacobson-Paris is closed question format and contains 0, 1, and 2 point options. The Schmidt questionnaire has 4 options, like the multiple choice tests, and there is 1 correct answer out of the 4 ones. And more similar to the usual questionnaire format is the Marcy questionnaire. You see a kind of Likert scale, but it's not really Likert scale. It's a kind of frequency scale. How frequently students and young adults use those strategies. Of course, we know that questionnaires have always a problem. They bring indirect information about reality. Questionnaires are very convenient to use. Lots of data are collected instantly, but we cannot be sure whether students were honest in filling in the questionnaire. And if they wanted to be honest, we still don't know whether the statements can be appropriately, objectively judged while filling in a questionnaire. These statements, if you can read them, are very general. A better idea might have been to make the questionnaires remember to the last reading session and to activate and recall the memories of the last reading activities. Here, there are general statements provided. Another 5-point Likert scale questionnaire is about general epistemic beliefs. Epistemic means the questions concern the origin, the nature, and the change of human knowledge. This EBI is quite famous. There is another one, MAI, Metacognitive Awareness Inventory. So questionnaires are everywhere. You can find a relatively good one, but with always the same problem about the indirect nature of the information. And closing to the approaching the final remarks, a currently interesting and living field is investigating adaptive problem solving, because adaptivity involves the appropriate ratio of metacognitive and non-metacognitive processes. Of course, we need much and diverse metacognitive processes in order to be adaptive. Task adaptivity means that the very same person in the very same context solves tasks according to the task characteristics. The person variable means that in the very same context, let's say in the mathematics classroom, the very same task can be solved quite differently from different persons. And the context variable means we solve mathematical problems differently in the mathematics classroom and on the street. There were some famous Brazilian research from Terezinha Nunes with street vendors and with fishermen who use mathematics in their everyday life, and they have strong interest, and it's a high stake for them to be appropriate in arithmetic skills. And when in the school they commit the same mistakes, or even worse, they commit arithmetic calculation errors when in the school, but they are error-free on the sea and in the streets. So that is the context variable. And my final conceptual umbrella for metacognition is, you surely know and maybe use the term self-regulated learning. This is an elegant and promising term. And in the most widely accepted understanding, self-regulated learning involves cognition, metacognition, and affective components like motivation. So self-regulated learning is something needed in the 21st century because the explosion in the amount of information it started in the 20th century. The schools can no longer involve all the necessary facts and knowledge that is needed in a job 20 or 50 years later. The school's job is now to teach the students to learn. And self-regulated learning is a promising tool for lifelong learning purposes. So this was the very general summary about the importance of metacognition, about its importance within self-regulated or autonomous learning. And in an age of information explosion and in the age of computers, when computers seems to know everything and seems to know everything better, we need to be more self-reflective. Why do I believe this? Because the AI said. The AI is a liar, and according to fresh empirical research, 3 months use of the ChatGPT destroys the brain irreversibly, cannot be recovered. So it's far better to use our thinking, self-regulated way, and that will surely contain metacognitive processes. And as you see, the traditional distinction between knowledge of cognition and regulation of cognition. Declarative meta-knowledge, procedural meta-knowledge. Finally, let me summarize the suggested readings for those who haven't encountered metacognition. So these are the core readings in my understanding. Start with Flavel's marvelous article. 1979 was the International Year of the Child by the United Nations. So everywhere in the world, there were movements, there were school building efforts, for example, in many countries, like in Hungary at that time. Then a nice chapter from a book by Kluwe will give you the distinction between declarative and procedural knowledge. Here you see the marvelous chapter from Campione, Brown, and Connell. That was the chapter that made me sad. I've been thinking in vain because those persons wrote about my ID, and of course in a better way. Nelson's visualization of the two levels can be found in this article, and the overly and widely cited Stanovich and West publication from 2000 is shown here. The design experiment from the Belgian colleagues can be found in the Mathematical Thinking and Learning journal. I really recommend, not only for math educators, but elementary educators as subject generalists should know it as well. And my mostly cited article is on the effects of using drawings in word problem solving. This was a design experiment with third grade students based on both metacognition and on drawings. And the two can be connected because children and teachers discussed the different types of drawings that can be made for word problem solving. And on the final slide, my model of the development of arithmetic skills is depicted. And Ahmad Hidayatullah's nice work. I'm only the co-author with small contributions, so it's Ahmad's nice article. One year ago it was published, and it has more than 60 citations in Google Scholar. And you see here the role of students' beliefs in students' mathematics achievement. So this is a large sample Indonesian study illustrating the importance of one particular metacognitive construct, namely the students' beliefs. So that was the end of my presentation. And hopefully I kept or managed the time more or less appropriately. And I try my best to understand if there are any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Dr. Sabah. Okay, let's give a virtual applause to Prof. Sabah for the insightful and nice presentation. Okay. Okay, and now we would like to open the floor to questions, everyone. And this is an excellent opportunity for everyone to engage with our speaker. And please feel free to type your question in the chat box, and I will read them aloud for Prof. Dr. Sabah. And if you prefer, you may also raise your hand, Bapak Ibu bisa angkat tangan langsung, ya, and to ensure your microphone is not muted. And we have limited amount of time, and so I encourage you to keep your question concise and relevant to the topic. Yeah. Okay, let's begin. Who would like to ask the first question? Silakan Bapak Ibu, ada pertanyaan related to metacognition and the role in education.
May I ask, Pak Sultan?
Okay, Bu Isma, please.
Yes, thank you so much for the time, Pak Sultan. And thank you for the insightful lecture, Professor Chabachikos. Please
Bu Isma,
introduce.
please, from the department.
Yeah, please introduce me. I'm Naila from Elementary Teacher Education Program. Professor Chabachikos, since you highlighted the significant role of metacognition in education, I focus on your closing remarks, Prof. As self-regulated learning involves the integration of cognition, metacognition, and motivation. So what practical approach can teacher use to simultaneously cultivate these three aspects in elementary students so that they not only learn from strategies, but also develop the motivation and self-efficacy to become lifelong learners? Thank you. Did you get my question?
Yes, but maybe the answer is so simple, and you yourself even answer the question, and probably you do the right way in your teaching if you at all think of this possibility of teaching those simultaneously. You cannot distinguish between processes focusing on only cognition and only metacognition. What is more, the individual differences within a classroom will enforce you to focus on more a bit metacognition to some children and more on cognition with others and more on motivation with a third group. So scaffolding, as the term I mentioned, involve a conscious selection of what is the best method of helping the children to proceed from level 1 to level 2 throughout. And there are much individual differences, as you know, in elementary education.
Okay, Wisma, is that answering your question?
Yes.
The
Yes, Pak Sultan.
integration.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oke, another questions, Bapak Ibu? Tanyaan yang lain? Oke, Bu Armeria. Oke, the head of English department.
All right, thank you, Pak Sultan. Hello, Prof. All right, first of all, thank you, Prof, for your valuable knowledge you have just shared to us. It awakens my awareness on the metacognition that I have applied during the experience of my teaching and learning. So I'm actually teaching English language and currently study linguistics, Prof. So your explanation actually reminds me with the Noam Chomsky's famous quote that is colorless green ideas sleep here furiously. Yeah. So it reminds me that in education, what is it? Metacognition is what helps our learners go beyond structure. But I also come with another idea, Prof. So I now conduct a community service. So the activity is I try to create learning media for young learner aged around 8 to 9 year old to improve their numerical literacy. So it's more mathematical rather than linguistics. So in designing learning media for those young learners to improve their numerical literacy, how can I effectively integrate the metacognitive instructions that encourage the children? That's my question, Prof.
Maybe I'm not so familiar with the idea of learning media, but I suspect this is close to reading education somehow. So I think it contains written and audio-visual material as well. Am I right?
Yes, Prof.
Reading, we had some experiment when mathematics and reading were developed simultaneously in the classrooms. I mean, on math classes and on reading classes, the same teacher followed the same principles. Metacognition has three general clusters: planning, monitoring, and evaluation. And in some cases, it's easy to start with the evaluation, like in mathematical word problems, when a nonsense result comes. And in reading, we usually start with the planning phases and joining motivation, reading skills, and reading comprehension, for example. That is one technique I learned from my co-author, János Steklács. Distribute a text and then don't allow to read them except for the title. And then talking about the title will activate previous knowledge, will raise the motivation, and they start to talk about and think about their own reading procedures well before actually reading. So I think media and reading learning starts or may start before actually immersed in the processes, talking about the ways we would like to do something, the possible advantages or disadvantages of talking about the title. I think these all contribute to a metacognitive enrichment of whatever learning is the target. Sorry, I'm not so familiar with language teaching and such things.
Okay, Prof.
Okay, thank you. Prof. Sabah, so relate to Bu Isma, the previous question at Bu Armeria. So it is possible to teach metacognition to the level of young learners. Is it okay?
That's a very straightforward question, and sometimes even colleagues and parents may ask, what is the right point to introduce conscious strategy use? And I believe in Michael Presley, American Reading Education. He claimed that from the first grade, when children cannot read, but they may start to learn reading processes. Explicitly and in childish name, they can talk about reading without actually reading skills. And similarly, in mathematics, for example, we can discuss the number line. Why are the positive numbers on the right side? Why is it not vertical? We can talk about these things without actually calculating. So as early as possible, we can talk about the strategies of reading, mathematics, and writing explicitly, not scientifically, but making the children and the parents clear that we not only drill, you know, this is a negative term used in education. The drilling means repeating as far as it's error-free. This usually ruins motivation, and what is more, this increased inequalities in education systems. So I haven't talked about the issue of equity, but metacognition-based research contributes to equity as well, because it increases the knowledge of both the high ability group and the low ability group as well. While if you divide the group into struggling students and high performing students, then there is a chance to further increase the otherwise existing differences between them. One further thing, when talking about strategies in reading, in mathematics, and in other fields, we have a high chance to use collaborative learning. I wouldn't say that collaborative learning is always the best thing. I didn't even believe in the overwhelmingly used collaborative strategies. But in an optimal dosage, we need collaborative learning. And collaboration might mean thinking about thinking, sharing ideas, which is fruitful for the best students as well, because if you are capable to share your knowledge explicitly to the weak learners, then you will proceed. And it's beneficial for the weak learners as well. Sometimes the peers, the same age group students, can explain the things better. Let me give you an example. When multiplying numbers with positive and negative signs. So minus multiplied by minus is plus. You know these rules. And a math teacher told me that she was working on this multiplication for 2 months in a vocational school in vain. When one of the students stood up and suggested another solution. And he said, friends or bros. Enemy is minus, friend is plus. What is my enemy's friend? It's enemy. Okay, what is my enemy's enemy? It's more or less my friend. And from that point, they could appropriately multiply the numbers with minuses and pluses. The teacher was so surprised, she had no idea that it can be taught in this way. Of course, it requires a kind of atmosphere in the classroom, which is much different from the drilling practice. I am too long, I'm afraid, in my answers.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Chaba. Yeah. Think about thinking. It is nice. Oke, ini ada Bu Vega ya, PhD candidate from Zagat. Bu Vega, you may ask some question or comment.
Yes, good morning, Prof. Chaba, and good morning, Bapak Ibu in FKIP. Yes, I listen well what Prof. Chaba's explanation, and I also make some notes. And I'm so lucky that last semester I also joined Prof. Chaba's class. So yeah, maybe that's my little comment on this.
Pak Sultan, there is another question in the chat box. You can read.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Vega, and I see my current doctoral student, Windy, here as well. So it's so nice.
Oke, thank you Bu Vega, sehat-sehat.
Yeah, thank
Another
you, Pak.
question, Prof. Syaba, in the chat room, yeah, from Pak Wiwi Wikanta from Biology Department. Yeah, related to the pizza achievement or results, yeah, in Indonesia. Is there any correlation with metacognitive learning strategies? So the achievement of pizza in Indonesia have consistently been low. Is there any relation with metacognitive strategies, Prof. Saba?
Metacognitive strategies are not measured in PISA, but some questionnaires address the learning to learn, which is related to metacognition. And the problem is, if we would or we could measure metacognition, I wouldn't say that using metacognition is always a good thing. Think of the novice drivers. They use more metacognition than me, at least about driving the car. But I feel that I'm not a bad driver at all, but I use less metacognition. So that's why there is no direct relation between the level of metacognitive strategy use and between performance. Otherwise, kindergarten children would beat us in calculating 4 plus 3. Kindergarten children use more metacognition in this case. The key is that in the best PISA scores countries, the education integrated the idea of metacognition, and they use it in different subjects. And importantly, it's included in teacher education. So teachers must know about the different possible ways of how children develop in their schools, and not only repeating the methods and ideas they were exposed to 30 or 20 years before. That might be a key. So there is another message, and I think Surabaya University is on the right way to formulate teacher education, to change the learning materials in teacher education.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Chaba. Is there any question? More, Bapak Ibu, silakan. Okay. Mas Yoga Yuriansa. Okay, please welcome your question. Masih mute, Mas, suaranya.
Thank you so much for Mr. Sabah from UN. Hello, Mr. Sabah. Let me introduce myself. My name is Yoga Yulian Saputra. I am a student in the Mathematics Education Study Program at Muhammadiyah University at Surabaya. I have a question for Mr. Sabah. Recently, in Indonesia, there has been many phenomena where students at a senior high school are unable to answer a basic problem such as addition, multiplication, and division. The question is, if I was a teacher, what should I do to prevent this from happening again?
Sorry, maybe I couldn't really understand your voice. There was a weak internet connection during the question. Can you rephrase or can somebody summarize it?
Okay. Recently, in Indonesia, there have been many phenomena where several students at a senior high school are unable to answer basic math problems such as addition, multiplication, and division. If I was a teacher, what should I do to prevent this from happening again?
If I understand your question, in the high school or in the secondary school, there are still students who are not competent in basic arithmetic processes. Maybe this was the situation you described, and what should we do since the curriculum is about higher level and other things in this age group and not about relearning addition or multiplication. I can give you the general ideas to go back to the root of the problem, and for example, to reveal why somebody doesn't know the multiplication table. The multiplication table has different parts. Some of them causes problems even for adults. And those, if you are a teacher, you have a pedagogical content knowledge about which is the most difficult multiplication. Of course, 8 times 7, isn't it? So for many people, this is the most difficult multiplication. We know the right answer, for example, but it requires a bit longer time to reveal, even for a mathematician. And in the school, if these small and easy tasks that has only one right solution are evaluated only on the basis of having the right answer, then the differences will remain between the students. If you don't only assess the correct answer, but you are curious about the process of thinking, then you can go to the root of the problem. You should ask the student to talk about the processes. Of course, they are shy or they may not have the vocabulary, but let's start it. Why is 8 times 7 63 for someone? For me, not, but if such an error occurs, the assessment should not only tell that this is wrong, but, and for everyone in the classroom, it might be educative to reveal how the thinking process should go wrong or went wrong. Thank you for the question. I feel that there are questions based on practice, and it requires some efforts for me to join my more or less theoretical knowledge to these practical problems. So thank you for these questions. I saw a written question in the chat appearing from Dian Karina. What are the effective metacognitive strategies for students' writing skills? Oh, it's beyond my expertise, sorry to say. Anyway, the literature is not so extensive in this field. On writing education, there are only very few prestigious journals. One is Reading and Writing, for example, and there are some more. So writing education is a difficult thing and beyond my expertise. If you go back to the Campione Brown Connell table, when reading, mathematics, and writing were compared, then you may find some idea from that table. Otherwise, it's far beyond my real expertise.
Okay, Budian. Is it clear, Budian? Oke, Bapak Ibu, ada pertanyaan yang lain? It is about 3 p.m. here, 3 minutes to 3 p.m. Is there any more question, Bapak Ibu? No more questions? I think it is all clear already about metacognition and the role in education. One last question, Bapak Ibu.
Bapak Sultan, maybe if any time I want to ask.
Okay, the closing question, maybe Pak Dayat ya.
Okay, thank you so
Final
much.
question.
Thank you
Okay,
so much
silakan.
for this opportunity. I'm curious about the experiences of Professor Safa Sikos during teachings or implementing the metacognitive technique. Is there any challenge or misconceptions about uh, during teaching metacognitive in the students?
We conducted some experiments with real teachers.
Yeah.
So, of course, there are difficulties to resolve. Teachers who think they teach well should be carefully confronted with any new idea. So we don't want to bring the message to them that they are on the wrong track. Our approach is we would like to give some new ideas. Of course, they may say or they may think that there is no time for any extra things. Then we can make suggestions to reformulate one lesson per week. That might be a cautious start. And action research as a form of educational research may mean that we can involve the teachers even in the definition of the problem. So we would like to go to the school to help the teachers when they already ask for help. That's a good strategy. We start to discuss them, the actual challenges they face, and when they explicitly claim that something is difficult for them, we can find a small hole in which we can introduce our ideas. So we don't want to replace the current tradition because we don't think that everything was wrong in the past. That's why it's a long process with several iterations. Thank you for the question.
Sorry, Prof. Chaba. There is one more question from Bu Gusma. Yeah. The concept of forming a metacognition in the early children. What is it like, Prof. Chaba?
Pembentukan konsep metakognitif pada anak usia dini seperti apa? Is this the question?
Yes, right. The concept of
No.
metacognition. Yeah.
I don't understand. So early childhood, or what
Yeah.
was it?
For young learners, very young learners, early children, for children.
As I mentioned, even in reading education and in mathematics education as well, from the very first grade of education in the school, metacognitive strategies can be labeled and can be discussed. In the child vocabulary, of course, we don't want to say scientific terms. And even in kindergarten, we can observe metacognitive strategies. There is a marvelous article from an English colleague, Whitebread, about the observable metacognitive strategies in the kindergarten. The earliest possible time you realize that someone has metacognitive processes is around the age of 1.5 years. From that on, there is a chance to help the development. So the question is translated by Windy before meta. Kindergarten educators know well that children at this age cannot really be focused on a task. If there is a planned training in the kindergarten, it usually lasts for only 10 minutes. And this might be sufficient to solve one such a task, 4 + 1, 4 + 2. You don't have to make it explicit that what you are doing is now a kind of application of metacognition. What is it? Metacognition. So don't imagine such situations. The knowledge and the key is in the teacher's role and the teacher's mind. You, as a kindergarten educator or as a teacher, possess the knowledge of the role of metacognition, but you don't have to teach explicitly. You can talk about it. For example, how nice that you use your hands. Oh, what an idea. That's a kind of acknowledgement of the metacognitive strategy in the child's language.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Chaba. So it depends on the age level, yeah,
This
how
one more,
to teach
Sultan.
metacognition. Okay.
Sultan, there is one more question from Sanda.
Oh,
Sanda
ada
Raisen.
lagi Pak Sanda.
And there is a written question I see. Is there a difference between metacognitive and learning styles? The answer is it's another half-an-hour presentation, but learning styles are less well-defined than metacognitive strategies. So I'm now focusing on Sanda.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Okay, Mr. Champa, I'm a PhD student in Indonesia. I'm very interested in metacognition. However, my ideas often interrupt when I discussing metacognition because my professor say so difficult to distinguish whether something what I want to know is cognition or metacognition. So far, when we measure metacognition using questionnaire, is often considered insufficient in capturing this concept. We know that metacognition is something that cannot be seen, So how can we actually measure metacognition correctly? Thank you.
This is a very important and good question from a colleague who is already studying metacognition. There was a plenary speech at a very large conference on the problems of assessment in metacognition. The main message was, don't use questionnaires, but the continuation of the sentence is, unless you have other kinds of data. Questionnaires should be supplemented by observation, interview, or think aloud protocols, or eye movement studies. So questionnaires themselves are indirect sources of information, and we really cannot be sure whether somebody has simply a knowledge item or in real life they really use that strategy. We cannot know from a simple questionnaire, but we can create situations in which eye movement research and interview on or observation or video recording or think aloud or log files of the screen while working on an online problem can add further information, and this is called triangulation method. Triangulating the data from different sources. It was a very important question. Thank you.
Is it answer your question, Pak Sanda? Triangulation? Masih mute, Pak.
One more, okay, Mr. Sultan?
Okay, go on, Pak Sanda.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Sabah. Yes, I get a think aloud procedure to measure the metacognition, but sometimes my professor say think aloud is considered to measure only cognition, not entirely metacognition, because from my subject information is can various change from time to time, very not apa ya, not pattern. It's very various. Thank you, bro.
Cognition and metacognition cannot really be distinguished because for different purpose, the seemingly same procedure can be either metacognitive or cognitive. Think aloud is a difficult thing, and it was proven only that for university students, it doesn't affect performance at the same time, but we don't have proof from the younger ages whether think aloud affects the ongoing task solution process. Young children might even be disturbed by this, whether they use the appropriate vocabulary, what is the expected right answer. So they don't really talk about their inner thinking, but they try to reveal what the teacher's expectation is. And sometimes they fall to the ground in between the two, and we don't have usable data. So think aloud protocol is useful for older students, and within younger students, it should be more or less an interview format, enriched maybe by some think aloud components.
Is it enough, Pak Sanda?
Okay, enough, Mr. Sultan. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, give applause to Prof. Sabah for a nice discussion and sharing, Prof. Sabah. So if I can conclude to this nice discussion, some of points is that think about thinking. It is about metacognition. berpikir tentang berpikir, how to teach our students or maybe ourselves, ya, how to be aware, ya, and conscious on what we are doing, on the process of teaching and learning, so we can enhance our results in the concepts, in the process of thinking. So again, it depends on us how to change the situation by the awareness and consciousness. Okay, I think that's all the main point, yeah, from the role of metacognitions in education. And again, the level of students will have the impacts on how to proceed, yeah, not only the object level, but how to reach the meta level of teaching and learning. Okay, again, thanks. Thank you very much, Prof. Cabasikos. Yeah, have a nice day. Yeah, and we close by Hamdalah, Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Pak Dayat, maybe you have some closing statement. Yeah, from me, I think that's enough. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Pak Dayat, your
Yeah,
closing statement.
on behalf of Faculty of Education again, I want to to say many thanks for Professor Chaba joining with us and share his expertise. So his lecture today is really broaden our perspective. We hope in the futures, in the next year or in 2 years, you will coming to here. We will inviting you. I hope. Thank you, Professor Sabah. See you again.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Is
It's
there
also
any photo session?
Oh yeah,
it's,
photo section. Last, we should take a photo.
mm,
Please, participant to open the camera. Pak Sultan, screen.
Smile, Bapak Ibu. One, two, three. Oke. Wah, ini ada banyak ini slide-nya ini. Mas Abu bisa dibantu ini. Mbak Rizka.
Assalamualaikum.
Oke.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam. Oke. Yang kedua, sebentar Bapak Ibu. One more, okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you Bapak Ibu for your active participation. Thank you Prof. Chaba. Have a nice day. Yeah.
Java, maybe you have closing remarks or statement.
I just wanted to say thanks for the invitation because it's always important for me to rearrange my ideas, and you helped me a lot. And maybe salam alaikum means the same everywhere in the world.
Yes.
Waalaikumsalam.
Peace with us.
Terima kasih. Kusunum. Kusunum Sipen.
Oke, terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Ya, sehat selalu semuanya. Oke.